Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about encumbrance again. So this is encumbrance part 2. The part 1 video, just called encumbrance, and I'll link it below, generated a lot of really good discussion in the comment section. So if you haven't watched it, you probably want to go watch that before you watch this, because I'm going to build on some things from the first part, and I'm not really going to dive into details. So if you haven't watched encumbrance, just stop this, go watch that, and then come back here. The first thing I noticed was a lot of people were saying how I was talking about encumbrance as weight-based. So items had weight, you could only carry a maximum weight, and there were things like perks and attributes that could increase that weight. And they suggested doing it with slots. And there's multiple ways of doing it. I mean, Arcanum had a grid, and you had to fit everything on that grid, and sometimes you had to Tetris things around to get a new object. And there are other games that you have like, every item just fits into one slot, and you start with 20 slots. And maybe there are bags you can find that increase your slots. Maybe there are perks that say every bag you pick up has 2 extra slots. Whatever it is, my point stands, though, that encumbrance is about imposing an inventory limit about how much the player can carry. So whether you do it with weight or whether you do it with slot, whether it's multiple slots, whether it's slot and weight, those are just limits. So we're still talking about the same thing. It's just, how is your encumbrance set up to limit the number of items that a player could carry at any given point? Then several of you said, well, just don't have as many items in the game. You're making this problem yourself by putting in so many items that now you have to invent encumbrance to prevent people from carrying them around. And let me just say that, well, first of all, there's a lot of reasons to have a lot of items in the game. A lot of games have character advancement based on items. So the things you buy, your skills, your perks, your attributes, those are part of character advancement, but so are the items you find. You find better weapons, you find better armor, you craft things, you do whatever you want to do. These are all part of making your character better, and these require you to get items. Now, crafting is an interesting one right there, because crafting usually requires you to collect materials. Either you find items and break them down into those materials, or you harvest those materials in the world off of dead bodies or off of plants or off of, ore veins, wherever the materials are that you need. So you need items to either break down into crafting materials, or you need to harvest and collect crafting materials, which is items that go in your inventory. Another thing that people often overlook about items, though, is items are very much a lore delivery vehicle. Outer Worlds was set up that way. It was supposed to be about a future where corporations ran everything and just deluged everyone in that society with tons and tons of things to buy. So it would be weird if there was no things like that to buy. If you're living in a society that tells you that there's a huge amount of things, but then doesn't let you do it. Also, the items themselves deliver lore about all the different companies, the different factions, because when you read the lore text on the item, it makes you understand that faction better. So items do a lot more than just make your character advance or, provide bullets for your guns or materials for crafting. They're a lore delivery vehicle. This led to another discussion people were having about, why do you have so many useless items in games? And by that, I mean, they were probably thinking of junk items. So Outer Worlds had a category of items called junk. They existed purely to provide lore through their lore text, to have things for you to find in the world that you could convert to money. So everything you found, just like, oh, here's more money. And some of those items could be used as crafting materials. So we've looped back to crafting again. Some of the things you find which seem useless aren't. They can be broken down into crafting materials if you do crafting. Now, that's the interesting thing is, what if you don't do crafting? Then those items truly are useless. But once you start to introduce that argument, a lot of other items that are in RPGs that you don't think are useless are completely useless to a certain type of player build. For example, if you find scrolls in a fantasy game and you're not playing a wizard or a cleric class or subclass, those are probably useless. Yes, there are a few scrolls that anyone can read, protection scrolls and things like that. But in general, scrolls for non-casting classes are useless. If I'm playing a fighter, I don't know what to do with these scrolls. Similarly, there are a lot of games that have weapons that are class restricted or attribute restricted or skill restricted. And if I don't have those prerequisites, that item is useless to me. Now, yes, again, you can design some games so that if you don't have those prerequisites, you can use the item. It's just much worse in your hands. Like if your strength is below the minimum strength, this weapon doesn't work as well, or this armor causes you to lose, dodging or stealth skill. You can design for it, but most people just don't use those if they don't match the prerequisites. So for those player characters, those items are useless, even though you don't think of them as useless. Other types of useless weapons is if you've made a very stealthy kind of character and there's a weapon that makes a lot of noise. Like let's say there's a gun that's super loud when you shoot it. You may not want to ever use that gun. That gun is useless for your build. Similarly, if, like I mentioned, if you're really weak, if you made a character with a low strength, there's going to be a lot of items, whether it's armor, weapons that have min strength, so either you can't use it or it gives you big penalties for using it, but also that strength may mean you don't want to carry that heavy stuff around because it encumbers you and may slow you down. It may, just by carrying it, or you can't carry it because it fills your inventory. So these are all things that you can try to say, well, let's just get rid of useless items. Useless items is a much bigger term than you're thinking. Or let's give fewer items. Okay, but now what are you going to do about crafting? What are you going to do about delivering lore? And my point here is a lot of these decisions you're making about encumbrance will affect other things in your game. Your UIs will be affected. Your other systems like crafting will be affected. How you deliver lore will be affected. How you do level design will be affected. If you don't have a lot of items you can pick up, why do you have chests and cabinets and bookcases? Are they filled with items that the player can't touch? Which to many players is frustrating. It's like, I can see that can on the table. Why can't I pick that can up? I see that book in the bookcase. Why can't I pick that book up? So you're making decisions that affect other parts of your game because of how you feel about encumbrance. A lot of people mentioned Bloodlines as being a game that I worked on that had very few items in it, but that's because the player character advancement in Bloodlines is not item based. It is based on when you go up a level, you put points into different abilities you have, and that's what makes you stronger. And then occasionally you have to drink blood to restore points. Items are not a big thing. You do not become necessarily a better vampire by getting a better gun. Yes, there are guns in the game, and yes, some vampires can use it, but like some vampire builds don't care about guns at all. So it was not predominantly an item-based game, so you can make different encumbrance decisions in that game than I could in, say, like Arcanum, where a big chunk of your player build isn't the points you spent in the character, it's the items you're putting on your character. And that choice makes your character better or worse in certain situations. So if you have a whole bunch of advancement decisions tied into items, you're going to want a bunch of different items because people want to make different characters. Boom, you're back to having a lot of items. Now you're going to have to make decisions on how to organize inventory, and encumbrance is one of the choices you can make. So, what's my conclusion on this one, the part 2? Some of you hate encumbrance. You want it gone, and you feel all the arguments made to keep it either aren't valid or can be fixed in other ways. You're not wrong. But some of you love encumbrance and think it's a valid part of a design. You view it as a challenge or providing a limit to the player, and it's something to work around. People were talking about friction points, and maybe I'll do a video at some point on friction points. But if you make a game that has no friction points, you're basically designing a game where the player starts and you hand them all their skills at max and all their attributes max and the best weapon in the game and say, have fun. Obviously, you do want some friction points. It's your decision on what those friction points are. In the end, encumbrance is a perfect example of a design choice that you as a designer have to make, but you no matter how you make that choice, you will not make everyone in the player base happy. No matter how you choose to, whether you have encumbrance or not, if your encumbrance is slot based or weight based or grid based, whether there are attributes or skills or items that change encumbrance, you're not going to make everybody happy. That decision you make will split your audience into people who love it and people who hate it. So you have to choose wisely and understand that that choice you're making affects so many other parts of your game. And this is just encumbrance. Everything you're picking for your game has these interrelated elements that you're going to have to figure out. Encumbrance is just part of one. And there is no right answer. So I'm not giving you the right answer. I'm just telling you, decide what kind of game you want to make. Those make your design pillars, and that will help you. That will help inform you what you want to do for encumbrance. Hope this helps.